We continue now at the top of Daf Tube Aleph and Meseches Moed Kattan. This is Moed Kattan Daf 9a. On the previous Amud, the Mishnah said you're not allowed to get married on Yontiv, on Chol Moed, and the Gemara gave a number of reasons for that. The Gemara now quotes a Brisa. The Brisa says that in all these cases where you're not allowed to get married on Chol Moed, however, mutar and lisa erev haregel, it is mutar to get married on erev Yontiv. As Rashi over here says, mutar and lisa erev haregel, kolomar mutar lechatchila, it's mutar lechatchila to get married on erev Yontiv. V'afagav the shivas yomim shel suuda yiyu beregel, even though the 7 days of celebration of the wedding are still going to fall out on the regel. And the Gemara says, kasha lakulu, that's difficult according to all the various opinions that were given. Why it's a problem to get married on Yontiv? It should be the same problem, having the 7 days of celebration. And so the Gemara answers, lo kasha is not difficult. Lamando amar misham simcha, the one who says that the issue is that you're not allowed to mix a simcha with a simcha, so ikar simcha chad yumuhu, that really only applies for the day of the actual wedding. The main simcha of the wedding is the day of the wedding, it's the one day. So if you get married erev Yontiv, the fact that you have the Sheva brachas, the fact that you have the 7 days of celebration following the marriage are going to be on Yontiv, is not an issue of ein ma'arvin simcha v'simcha. Lamando amar misham tircha, the one who says that it's a tircha to do a wedding, so therefore also the same answer, ikar tircha chad yumuhu, the main tircha is that one day of the wedding, so that can't take place on Yontiv. But again, the other parts of the celebration of the wedding, the subsequent days are not a problem. Laman damar misham bittul period veribia, the one who says that everyone's going to push off their wedding to Yontiv, they'd rather make the wedding on Yontiv if that was possible, and that's going to be a bittul of period veribia, a bittul of pruravu. So again, l'chad yuma lo mashi inish nafshe, people aren't going to push off a wedding to erev Yontiv when that's the only day available. That they're not going to do. And the Gemara continues with the ein ma'arvin simcha besimcha minolan. From where do we know that you're not allowed to mix one simcha with another simcha? Again, that was one of the reasons given why you're not allowed to get married on Yontiv. And the Gemara quotes a pasuk dichsiv, because the pasuk says, this is in Sefer Melachim, Vayash Shlomo ba'esahi esachag v'chol Yisrael imo kahal gadol milavo chamos ad nachal Mitzrayim lifnei Hashem Elokeinu shivas yomim v'shivas yomim arbo asar yom. This was a 14-day celebration when they were building the Beis HaMikdash. And so the Gemara says, V'mi'isa d'ma'arvin simcha v'simcha. Now, if it is true that you're allowed to mix one simcha with another simcha, iboy le'leminter adachag, he should have really waited until Sukkos, u'mi'avid shiva lahacha ulahacha, and then he would have done 7 for this and 7 for this. And as Rashi over here explains, v'yavid zayin yomei simcha lahacha ulahacha lechanukas habayis u'leregel. In other words, why did he do a 7-day celebration for the Beis HaMikdash, and then you had a celebration of Sukkos? Do them both at the same time. You should have waited till Sukkos and you celebrate both, the regel and the chanukas habayis, at the same time. Obviously, Shlomo HaMelech did not do that, because again, in ma'arvin simcha b'simcha. And the Gemara says, V'dilma mintar lo natrinan. So maybe the real reason why Shlomo HaMelech, he didn't do it all on Sukkot, is because you're not supposed to purposely set it up and delay so that you do it all on the Yontiv. However, v'hechad isra mi'avdinan, but if something would fall out on the Yontiv, you could be ma'arvin simcha v'simcha if something happens to fall out on the Yontiv. So maybe, again, when it would come to a wedding as well, you can't purposely push it off for the holiday, but if it falls out on the holiday, it's not a problem. As Rashi over here says, "V'dilma minter lo natrina nisuan ad haregel ki hechi de lo natar Shlomo." Shlomo didn't delay until Sukkot, the celebration of the Beis HaMikdash, and we wouldn't do that with the wedding either. Avol imisar milayav, but if it falls out during the Yontiv, maybe there's no problem doing it on the Yontiv. And so the Gemara says, no, iboy le l'shiurei pursa. So no, what Shlomo HaMelech could have done was he could have left off a small portion of the Beis HaMikdash, not finished building it, and then he would finish it exactly on Sukkot. So it wouldn't be that he was delaying the celebration; he would just delay the building of the Beis HaMikdash, or the completion of the building of the Beis HaMikdash until Sukkos. To that the Gemara says, no, shiurei binyan Beis HaMikdash lo meshayrinan. We're not allowed to delay finishing up building the Beis HaMikdash. But the Gemara says still, iboy le l'shiurei ba'ama kalya orev. He could have just left off the ama kalya orev. Rashi says that means ama kalya orev hagag kolo mekatzer lamala ad ka'ama. The roof of the Beis HaMikdash, it's sharpened for about an ama. Umechapen oso sham bebarzel, and they coated it with metal over masmeirim and with spikes. Kadesh lo yeshvu ha'orvim olav. This was in order that the ravens shouldn't sit on the Beis HaMikdash. Zeu lo chashav kibinyan. That's not really building anything. Those are just additions to the Beis HaMikdash. He could have left those off, and again delayed until Sukkos. And to that the Gemara says, ama kalya orev tzorach ben yabayasu. Also, when it comes to those spikes that were added to the roof of the Beis HaMikdash, that's also a tzorach ben yabayis. That's a tzorach of the Beis HaMikdash, and you really shouldn't delay that completion either. So in any case, the Gemara still has a question. The Gemara says, if that's the case, maybe Shlomo HaMelech, just because it was finished, so that's why he celebrated before Sukkot, but maybe if it would have turned out that it would have fallen out on Sukkot, you would do it on Sukkot. So how do we see anything from Shlomo HaMelech? So the Gemara answers, Elami demiyaser krad. Really, the real source from Shlomo HaMelech is because the pasuk over here has extra wording. Michtik siv arba asar yom. Let us see. It says over here in the pasuk it was 14 days of celebration. Shivas Yamim v'Shivas Yamim Lamli. So why does the pasuk have to say 7 days and 7 days? Shema Mino, you see from this, Hani L'chud v'Hani L'chud, that these were separate celebrations. The whole point is you did not want to mix the celebration of the holiday with the celebration of the building of the Beis HaMikdash. The Gemara continues, Amar Rabbi Parnich, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Parnich says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, Osa Shana lo asu Yisrael es Yom HaKippurim. That year, Klal Yisrael did not celebrate or did not fast on Yom Kippur. They were worried and they were saying, Shemin eschayvu sonei shel Yisrael kloya. Maybe the enemies of Israel are not chayav destruction. Maybe this was a great sin that we did, that we didn't fast on Yom Kippur. Yatzda Baskol v'yamra, Baskol came out and said, v'yamra lahem, and said to them, Kulchem mizumonin l'chayo olam haba. You're all prepared, you're all destined for a life in the world to come. Rashi over here says, Lo asu Yisrael Yom Kippurim lefisha shiva yamim shelifnei Sukkos, because the 7 days before Sukkos, Kol Yom asu simcha, they made a celebration every day. Simcha mishta. Techsev vayash Shlomo ba'isei as achag shivas yamim v'shivas yam arba asur yom. So they made a celebration, they had a feast. So therefore it turns out they had a feast on Yom Kippur as well. And again, they were worried, they were concerned. Baskol came out and said, there's nothing to be concerned about. The Gemara says, "My derosh." What did they darshan that they felt that they didn't have to observe Yom Kippur that year? Amru, they said, Kal v'chomer, the following Kal v'chomer. Umam mishkan she'en kedushaso kedushas olam. With regards to the mishkan, where the kedusha of the mishkan is not eternal, the carbon yachid docha Shabbos, and a carbon of the individual. Rashi over here says, the carbon yachid shel nesiim, talking here about the karbonos that the nesiim brought. It was docha Shabbos, the Isser Skila. That was docha Shabbos, and Shabbos is very strict. It's an Isser Skila. So mikdash the kedushaso kedushas olam. When it comes to the Beis HaMikdash, where the kedusha is eternal by the Beis HaMikdash, the carbon sibur, and we're talking about carbon sibur. Rashi over here says the carbon sibur to mashayu makarivin bimei chanukas habayis carbon sibur. Any offerings they're bringing during the dedication of the Beis HaMikdash is considered a carbon sibur. V'yom HaKippurim de onish kares, and Yom HaKippurim is not as strict as Shabbos. It's a punishment only of kares, not of skila. So lo kol shekain. So certainly we can not observe Yom HaKippurim due to the celebration of the building of the Beis HaMikdash. So the Gemara says, but if that was the case, why are they worried at all? They had a good drasha. So the Gemara answers, Hasam Tzorach Gavoa. Over there by the Mishkan, when they were bringing karbanos, it was just bringing karbanos. It was a Tzorach Gavoa, it was for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But over here by the Chanukas Habayis Tzorach Hedyot, it wasn't just simply bringing karbanos. There was a Mishta, there was a feast. It was also for themselves. There was a Tzorach Hedyot, so therefore they were concerned maybe that's not appropriate. Gemara says, Hachanami, but if that's the case here also, mi'avid li'avdu mechel lo nechlu v'lo lishtu. Very simple solution. You should bring the karbanos, but don't eat them, don't drink, don't celebrate. So to that the Gemara says, no, ein simcha b'lo achilo shasiya. There would be no celebration if they're not eating and drinking as well, and therefore they felt it had to be a proper simcha, they had to eat and drink. So again, they did not observe Yom Kippurim in that year. The Gemara continues, Mishkan de dochi Shabbos minolan. How do we know by the Mishkan that they actually were docha Shabbos? How do we know that they brought these karbanos yachid on Shabbos? Gemara says, if you're going to say, because the pasuk says, b'yom harishon or b'yom hashvi, it talks about on the first day, on the seventh day, every day they're bringing these karbanos for the chanukas hamizbeach by the nesiim. So it turns out that the seventh day is going to be Shabbos. If you're going through more than 7 days, obviously one of the days is going to be Shabbos. But to that the Gemara says, no proof. Dilma shvila karbanos, maybe it was the 7th day that they brought karbanos, but who says they brought on Shabbos? Rashi says, Bayom hashvi umash malon yom zayin hainu Shabbos. You could understand that Yom Hashvi is Shabbos, but maybe not. Dilma shvila karbanos, shem hikriv nasi shishi be'erev Shabbos. For example, if a nasi brought the 6th one brought on Friday, makriv nasi shvi bechor b'Shabbos, maybe the 7th nasi didn't bring on Shabbos, maybe he brought on Sunday. Umay shvi la karban nasi, the 7th, those words by Yom Hashvi might be the 7th nasi to bring a carbon. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to be on Shabbos. And so the Gemara says, Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak says, Amar Kra, because the pasuk says, Biyom Ashtei Asar Yom. It says on the 11th day. Rashi over here says, Biyom Ashtei Asar Yom, Hayom Yisera. It's really an extra word. They don't have to say the word Yom an extra time. Mashma Ma Yom Ratzov She'en Bo Hefsek, and the Mashmos is, just like a Yom is consistent, there's no break within one day. Af kulhu yud aleph yom ratzov. So too there was a connection between all 11 days, meaning they were consecutive. Deleka hefsek b'entayim afila b'Shabbos. There was no interruption even on Shabbos. So we're really learning out from this word yom Again, my yom kulo ratzuf, just like a day is entirely consecutive, meaning there's no gap within a day. Afashtei aser kulon ritzuf, and so too these 11 days, they were consecutive, there was no gap. But the Gemara continues, V'dilma yomim haruyin. But maybe when it says 11 days, it means consecutive days that are fit for bringing these karbanos. Maybe they didn't bring it on Shabbos. So to that the Gemara says, no, ksiv kra achrina, because there's another pasuk that says, again by the Nesiim, b'yom shnei masar yom. It says it again on the 12th day. It says the word yom an extra time. Ma yom kulo ratzuf, af shnei masar yom kulon ritzufin. Just like a day is consecutive, there's no gaps within a day, so too the 12 days are all consecutive. But the Gemara continues, V'dilma hachanami yomim haruyin. But maybe over here also by b'yom shnei masar yom, maybe it also means on only the days that are fit. Again, you're not supposed to bring these karbanos by the Nesiim on Shabbos. So to that the Gemara says, Im kain, if so, trei kroi lamali. What do you need two psukim for? The fact that it says b'yom ashtei asar yom and it says b'yom shnei masar yom, it says it twice, that tells you that it was consecutive, even including Shabbos. And the Gemara continues, Umikdash de docha yom HaKippurim and Nolan. How do we know that this celebration of the Beis HaMikdash, how do we know that was docha yom HaKippurim? And the Gemara says, if you're going to say because the pasuk says again in Sefer Melachim that it was a 14-day celebration, that implies that it was docha yom HaKippurim, v'dilma yomim haruyin. Again, maybe the same thing. Maybe it only means the days that are fit to have a Mishta celebration, which would not include Yom Kippur. And to that the Gemara says, Gomar yom yomei hasam. We learn out the word yom, says yom over here, and it says yom by the Nesiim, like we said, as Rashi over here says, Gomar yom yomei hasam min Nesiim, the Mishkan. We learn from the Mishkan, from the Nesiim, the Gamrina mitrei kroi the Havid Ritzuf. And we just learned above that that was a consecutive celebration, afilu b'Shabbos, even on Shabbos. Af Mishta the Chanukas Habayis, so to the feast that took place in dedicating the Beis HaMikdash in the times of Shlomo HaMelech, have a Yedalid Ritzufim v'afilu b'Yom HaKippurim. It was a 14-day consecutive day celebration, included even Yom HaKippurim. The Gemara continues, we said above, Yotz the Baskol v'Yamra lehem kulchem mizumonin l'chayo olam haba. A Baskol came out and said to them, you're all prepared, you're all destined for life in the world to come. So the Gemara says, how do we know that HaKadosh Baruch Hu really pardoned them, really forgave them for celebrating on Yom Kippurim? And to that the Gemara says, the Tani Tachlifa, because Tachlifa taught, Vayom Hashmini Shilach Esa'am, Vayevarchu Es HaMelech, Vayelchu Lo Aleim Smeichim V'tuvei Leiv, Al Kol HaTova Sherasa Hashem LeDavid Avdu, L'Yisrael Amo. So we darshan this pasuk. L'Yohaleim, it says they went back to their tents. Sheholchu Matzu Neshem B'Tara. What that means is everybody returned to their tents. They found that their wives were pure. And Semeichem, what does it mean when the pasuk says they were happy? Shenenu mizev hashchina, they were happy because they derived pleasure, benefit from the Shechina. Tovei leiv shekol echad v'echad nisabra ishto beben zachar. What does it mean tovei leiv? Every single one of them, his wife became pregnant with a son. Al kol hatova. What does it mean al kol hatova? Sheyotz the baskol v'yamar lehem, that a baskol came out and it said to them, kulchem mezumonin l'chay olam haba. You're all destined for life in the world to come. LeDavid Avdo LeYisrael Amo. Then it says for David his servant and for Klal Yisrael his nation. So the Gemara says Bishlam LeYisrael Amo Da'achalu Avon Yom Kippurim. I understand what we mean by LeYisrael Amo. Again, the pasuk at the end says the tova that was done for Klal Yisrael. That makes sense because HaKadosh Baruch Hu pardoned them for the sin of not observing Yom Kippurim. Ela LeDavid Avdo Mahi. But what does it mean when it says I'll call HaTova Sharasa LeDavid? What is the tova that is done for David HaMelech? Amar Rav Yudah, Rav Yudah says in the name of Rav, V'shosha bikei Shlomo lahachnis Aron l'mikdash. When Shlomo wanted to bring the Aron into the Beis HaMikdash, Dovku she'arim zelozeh, the gates, they closed, they clung to one another, they closed. Amar Shlomo said, Esrem v'yarba renanos. He said 24 praises v'lonen, and he wasn't answered. The Gemara continues, Pasach v'yamar, then he opened his mouth and he said, Su'u sharim rasheichem, the gates you should lift your heads v'lonen, and again he was not answered. Kevan shamra, but then when he said, Hashem Elokim al tasha p'nei mishichecha, Zachar l'chastei David avdecha, he said, remember the chesed of David HaMelech, David your servant. So miyad nene, immediately he was answered. In other words, by mentioning David HaMelech, he was answered. And bi'osasha nefchu p'nei sonei David kishulei kedera. At that moment, the faces of the enemies of David HaMelech, they turned to the color of the bottom of a pot, meaning v'yedu hakol, meaning that everybody now knew shemachalo HaKadosh Baruch Hu al oso oven, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu forgave David HaMelech for that sin. That's a reference to the sin with Bathsheba. So you see, not only was Klal Yisrael forgiven for not observing Yom Kippurim, you see David HaMelech, it was indicated publicly that HaKadosh Baruch Hu had forgiven him for his sin as well. And the Gemara continues, Rabbi Yonasan ben Asmai, Rabbi Yehuda ben Geirim, Rabbi Yonasan ben Asmai, and Rabbi Yehuda, the son of converts, Tanu Parshas Nedarim, Bei Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai. They learned the Parsha of Nedarim by the yeshiva of Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai. Iftar minei be'orsa, so at night they departed from him. They said, we're leaving. L'tzafar, then in the morning, Hadu they returned. V'kam iftar minei, and again they departed from him, meaning again they said that they were leaving. Amar Lusa, he said to them, V'lav iftarisu mini borsa, but didn't you already say your goodbye last evening? Why are you coming back again today in the morning to say goodbye? Amrulei, so they said to him, Maratanu Rabbeinu, our rabbi taught us, Talmud sheniftar me rabba, when a student departs from his rebbe, v'lon ba'osa ha'ir, but he stays overnight in that same city, tzarech li pater mimenu pamacheres. He has to go back to the rebbe in the morning when he's actually leaving, and he has to say the goodbyes again when he's actually departing. And where do we know this? Shenemar, like the pasuk says, this is pasuk in Sefer Malachim by the dedication of the Beis Hamikdash by Shlomo HaMelech. It says, by Yom Hashmini Shilach Esam. It says he sent the nation on the 8th day. By Yivarach Ves HaMelech, they blessed the king. Uchsiv, and then it also says, of Yom Esrim Ushlosh Lachodesh Hashvi Shilach Esam. It says on the 23rd day of the 7th month, he sent off the nation. Sounds like he sent them off twice. Elamikan, rather we see from here, Latalman Aniftar Me Rabo, when a student departs from his rebbe, V'lon Ba'osa Ir, but he stays overnight in that city, Tzarech Li Pater Mimenu Pamacheres. He has to depart from him another time. So Amar Le Livrei. So now Rabbi Shimon bar Yochai said to his son, Bnei Adam Halalu Anashim Shel Tzurahim. These individuals over here, they're Chachamim, they're wise people. Zil Gabeon, you should go to them, Delivar Chuch, and they'll give you a bracha. So as also he went, Ashkechinu Dekaramu Kroy Hadadi, and he found that they were saying a contradiction in Psukim. Ksiv, there's one pasuk that says, Palis Magal Reglecha V'chol Derechecha Yikonu. Pasuk seems to say that you should level the path in front of you. We'll take a look at Rashi in a moment. Uchsiv, and then the pasuk also says, Orachayim Pentafales. You shouldn't level the path of life. Rashi over here explains, Palis Magal Reglecha Kolomar Shkol Mitzvos. It's really referring to the mitzvos over here. The first pasuk is saying you should weigh mitzvos. Va'ayin bohen, inspect the mitzvos. Eza mitzvah gadola, v'asa gadola. Try to figure out which mitzvah is greater, and you do the greater mitzvah. But the pasuk also says, "Orachayim pentafales demashma kol mitzvah." Shetavol liyadcha, say that you shouldn't be weighing mitzvahs. If you have the opportunity to do a mitzvah, you do it. Aseyosa ben gedola ben ketana. It doesn't matter if it's a big mitzvah or a small mitzvah. V'altaniach ketana mipnei hagedola. Don't leave off a small mitzvah because you measure out that there's a bigger mitzvah you should be doing. So they felt that this was a contradiction in psukim. And so they answered, Lokash is not difficult. Kan b'mitzvah she'efshar la'asos al yedei acherim. In one case, we're talking about a mitzvah that can be done through others. Rashi over here says, mitzvah she'efshar la'asos al yedei acherim, tefales palis magal reglecha shetasa to ha'gedola, v'chaverchi yasu ha'ketana. If there's a smaller mitzvah that can be done by someone else, so you should do the bigger mitzvah and leave the smaller mitzvah to be done by your friend. We'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Tes Amud Beis.